Welcome back to another episode of the Vet Worthwhile podcast. I am James Yost, partner and wealth advisor at Signature FD, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Travis York, owner of 3-1 Advisors. Travis, how are you?
I'm doing great today, James. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. We are back with another episode of the Vet Worthwhile podcast. Hope everybody's doing well. Travis, how are you, man? We got a special guest today. Who are we talking to?
Doing really well, James. I'm excited. We have Dr. Megan Sprinkle with us today. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I'm super excited about this conversation. Again, I think a lot of what James and I hope to do when we started our podcast was talk to people who maybe saw the vet world a little bit differently, maybe called out some things that were going on so people could learn something new. And I'll kind of dive in, get a little bit of your background, but I think you definitely fit into that bucket that maybe you see the vet world a little bit differently. So we're joined today by Dr. Megan Sprinkle, who is by trade a veterinarian, but she's self-proclaimed odd veterinarian with a cute name. Dr. Sprinkle truly is her name. She's a non-clinical DVM who has defined success very differently from past generations. She is a fellow podcaster with Vet Life Reimagined, which focuses on exploring the possibilities of veterinary medicine. She works in the leadership of business development and practice development at BSM Partners, a large pet consulting firm. She is also an advisor to a few startups such as Healthy Pet Connect, a pet technology company. And I'm sure this only probably hits the tip of the iceberg on all your visions, goals, and where you're going in aspirations. So maybe before we dive into all of our questions, Megan, I'll turn it over to you and let you just share a little bit about yourself for our listeners.
Yeah, so I definitely have felt like an odd veterinarian for a long time because even from a young age, realized that there were so many things that you can do working with animals in veterinary medicine. So I just always had this very expansive curiosity kind of coming into a career, and it made it really fun, I will say. It made it very fun. I have lots of different experiences. And everything was just like, sure, let's hear it out and try something. So it's definitely brought me a lot of different places in my career.
Love it. Super excited to have you on today. I mean, would love to drill in a little bit deeper into your career path. So if you could just kind of take us back to the beginning and maybe give our listeners a little insight into how you started and then how you kind of evolved over the years into doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, I have a very traditional story of knowing very young that I wanted to work with animals. So sorry, that one is a repeat probably for many other veterinary professionals. But like I said, I had a very big imagination. I was extremely curious and luckily had parents that allowed me to explore that curiosity. They constantly would take me to zoos and aquariums. And so I saw people working with animals in so many different aspects. And I actually fell in love with those animals. So I had a dream of being like a dolphin doctor or something like that. And I even went to career camps at SeaWorld and really got to explore these different career paths pretty in depth at a very young age. And I still wanted to do that. I have lots of different stories and experiences exploring these different species. Still want to do that going into vet school. And it wasn't until kind of the end of vet school where I was looking a little bit closer at what the veterinarians were doing in these areas, and I was like, I don't know.
Okay, there wasn't technically a term. Nobody was actually had a doctor of dolphinary, and so they had to like make a career change.
No, and again, I worked in a lot of zoos and aquariums, and the stuff that I was getting to do as an intern or an extern, they were a little bit different than what the vet does, right? And when I actually could see what they were doing, which was anesthesia and paperwork, and it's like, no, I want to be like with the animals and the trainers and working with people and everything. And so I was like, so what can I do that allows me to do more of what I like to do? And what I really found fun was working in the nutrition department of these zoos and aquariums. And it is a lot more than just organizing fish to hand out to the animals. It required a lot of creativity. You had to make it environmentally enriching. And yeah, so it was so much fun. And that's when I actually started getting interested in nutrition, was even in that aspect. And so that's when I knew I wanted to specialize in nutrition.
Very interesting. So, I mean, I guess one of the things that like I always think I struggle with personally, and so, you talk with a lot of veterinarians, it's always been a very traditional path in veterinary medicine, right? Many of the veterinarians that like you work with, and that traditional path is maybe evolving, right? It used to be like you graduate from vet school, you go work for another doctor, and 4 years after that, you go buy your own hospital, and that's just what veterinarians do. And for you, can you just talk a little bit about, have you been more like intentional? Like, hey, I like nutrition, so I'm going to go set out and find every single thing I can about nutrition? Or has it been more like you're just a great networker, a great, connector, and then doors open and you're like, I guess I'm just going to be brave and go in this door even though I don't know what it means?
A little bit of both. So some of it was definitely very, very intentional because I went to a vet school that didn't really have a huge zoo program. So everything that I did as experiences, I had to search for them. I had to apply for them. By the way, they're competitive and they pay jack squat. So you're often paying for these experiences. And so a lot of that was very intentional trying to do that. Going into the nutrition side, I did start to go down a little bit more of a traditional pathway. During my generation, it was very, very common to do internships. That was almost like the thing you did because the job demands were not quite as crazy as they are now. So, that internship allowed you to get a little bit more experience and make your resume look better. But I really was doing it because I wanted to get to the nutrition residency. So I did an internship and then got into my residency. It wasn't really until the residency that, okay, like a lot of veterinarians, you get to the end of the very clear path, right, of schooling. And then it's like, oh no, there's the world. I have to go find, what am I going to do in this world? And that's when I had to start looking at options and getting creative and being open and curious. But even in residency, at the time, all I really knew, the three most guaranteed paths were academia, private practice, or industry. And those were the three that I was kind of looking at as categories. And I really had found my place in my residency with people, because when I got to my residency, it was so sad. There were actually people who didn't even know we had a nutrition department. So I was like, oh dear, okay, well, I'm not a person to sit in my office and twiddle my thumbs and read a book. I need to go and learn. And I know it sounds really annoying at first, but I would watch the transfer sheets and see, ooh, that sounds like a good nutrition case. And I would make friends with the other residents in the hospital and build these relationships. So going back to your question about, was I just a really good networker? I was not afraid to talk to people. And I'm so glad that I did that because I found that it was potentially even a mini superpower, because I ended up growing the service quite substantially while I was there. And it was all because I was building relationships with other professionals in the hospital, so they would refer to us. And so that was so much fun, working with others.
Can I jump in with just a question there, Megan? Just like having been around veterinarians my entire life, many veterinarians are not like natural networkers. It's just probably not their preferred course. Like, I don't want to stereotype, and I don't want to fall into Myers-Briggs, but there tends to be like a very specific Myers-Briggs personality profile that attracts veterinarians. You're definitely outside of that. Can you talk about how, if your natural ability is not networking, I mean, you've had so many opportunities. Sounds like they've opened up and built things out of that. How do you encourage your colleagues to lean into their networking, whether they own a hospital and want to network in the community or network in growing their career path? How did you maybe pass that on to some of your classmates who it didn't come naturally to?
Yeah. And I don't know if it was entirely natural, although my parents do tell stories when I was super little that I would run away in the middle of the grocery store and go find kids in, I guess, in shopping carts. I don't know. But definitely, I hit that junior high awkward stage and I definitely embraced my introversion. But I think some of it was a little bit of forced. And I understood that if I wanted to do these cool things that I dreamed about doing, I was going to have to get outside my comfort zone. And then once I did and I kept doing it, I realized, oh, this is actually really fun. People are cool. So it became a rewarding experience. And while I'm still very much an introvert, I am one of those that, like Cinderella, there's a certain time on the clock and I need to go home and go to bed or I turn into a pumpkin. But, I found that it is rewarding. And even though it's still not natural, the hardest part is sometimes getting yourself to go to that event. Once you're there and you start engaging, that's kind of what I found was like, oh, okay, I get this now. This is really the fun part of life, is really building these relationships.
No, I love that. That's such an interesting story. And we love learning more about this. I mean, if one of our listeners was listening to the podcast and they had curiosity on maybe they weren't super excited about the path that they're on, and they might want to consider some alternatives. Like, how do you guide people and how do you advise people who might not want to go the traditional path of either owning their own practice or being an associate? Maybe they want to figure out something else. How do you guide them?
Yeah. And if you're not quite sure what that is, you're just kind of looking for something different. One of the big things that I think is important is really understanding what your personal values are. What are those values that as long as I feel like I am this person living out these values, that I'm good, I'm in my joy place. I think that's really helpful because a value is not clinical veterinarian. That's not a value. That's a job title. But if you're a learner, you can live out learner in so many different ways. So I think it starts with trying to understand a little bit more about yourself and what are these values that you really want to live out, especially in your work. So I think that's a good starting point for that. And if you don't know what that means, there are lists out there of values. You can start with those to just try to put some words behind these types of feelings. But then the other thing that I have found, the constant learning I am still doing myself, is talk to people about it. Talk to people about your interest in trying something new. Now, you may not necessarily want to go to your boss and say, I really want a different job. Like, that's maybe not the best approach, but share with people that you're interested in growing and learning new things. And I have found when you speak it out into the universe, you have people, they'll keep that in the back of your mind. And when they see an opportunity that comes up, they will think of you. It's like you have this army that's kind of looking out for you and finding different opportunities. So that's another way to kind of find all these opportunities. And then lastly, just really be open to trying something new. I think another thing is we get so nervous that if we make this decision, it's permanent. And, we can't change it, but you can. It's okay. You made the change. You can always make another change. And I think that's helpful too, to kind of relax yourself. And it's like, oh, it's okay. It's just something new. I'm going to try this. If I don't like it, I learned something. I learned what I don't like.
I definitely would say there's not going to be any difficulty getting back on the associate trajectory in the event they wanted to take a hiatus or pivot. You're not diving off the deep end. It's really a more simple step that they can easily get back to if they want to.
Exactly. Yes.
And I almost feel like there's even become alternative paths in like the clinical side and ownership side and just like the practicing side, right? Like, and sometimes it's just, I think, just pushing to rethink what that may look like, right? And out of that, over the last 2 years, you've seen this kind of evolution, whether it sustains or doesn't, in like relief doctors who are thinking about how they practice medicine so differently than what anybody ever has in the past. I don't know if you have any kind of thoughts on other maybe like emerging trends around people who love practice, but maybe just want to love it in a different way.
Absolutely. And that's when I said, just make it known that you're interested in learning new things. And I had a great guest. I know this will come out a little bit later, but my guest, Marina John, she gave a great example of if you wanted to be the person that led the clinic's Fear for You program. Like, that's really neat. You would be able to take this new role and this initiative and, make the whole practice better. So even something like that, if you're really passionate about a certain topic, I've mentioned to some people, I am a big component of having like open houses with the community. What about if you led some educational conversations in an open house? So, if you have a passion area of topic, one, it allows you to explore in a pretty no risk way, right? You can try out education. Do you like that? And then you start to learn these things about yourself. You can also say, hey, I've tried this and I found out I really like it and I'm pretty good at it. So whether you want to stay in the hospital or you want to look at another job and something outside of a clinic, you now have built these skills and an understanding of what you like. So I think it's great to start within the clinic.
That's awesome. Another thing, like you were talking about, like finding like what you're good at and what you like, it always feels like there's overlap, right? Like we tend to not like things that we're not good at. And I feel like I've used that strength finder where like it goes through and it like kind of gives you some directions. I don't know if you've had any experience or classmates or colleagues and thoughts on that, but like I feel like that's a good place to even start if you're stuck, because it just like can help call out things that you may naturally be good at. And you're like, didn't even really realize I liked that.
Yes. So I'm a person who really likes personality tests. I'm not going to lie. And I have done strength finders. And I think that helps too, because it also may help you find the words behind the values. So like some of mine are empathy and learner and connectedness, which I'm definitely, I see things, I'm like, oh, I see how this all fits and connects together. So it can really help to help you understand more about yourself and what, again, that overlap of interest and skill kind of come into play, and how can I live that out in my work?
I'd love to hear more about your podcast. Just for our listeners, I mean, what are you up to now? Go into the podcast a little bit and the story there and what you're trying to accomplish there, but also what you're doing with Healthy Pet Connect. Would love to learn more about just kind of what you're doing right now.
Yeah. So I definitely, probably around the pandemic times, I've always been fascinated by innovation and new things and just probably more personal growth, and that just kind of all overlaps. And I also helped my husband start a business in the pandemic. Nothing related to vet med, although I have seen where it kind of overlaps, but he does 3D printing. And when he started that business, he did the technical 3D printing side. I learned marketing and social media and all of that. I found out, oh, man, I actually really like this. And so I was learning skills and different things that I liked. And when you're kind of an odd veterinarian, other odd veterinarians sometimes cross your path and you get along. And so I found different startups that were, founded by veterinarians, and Healthy Pet Connect is one of those. So they are a tech company that Ken's first love is cats. So it's about weight loss for cats and how we can use technology to communicate with the pet owner and the veterinary clinic. And it's very, very cool. And funny enough, even though there's a lot of nutrition component to that, he often asks me for my design and marketing skills. So yes, I do. I love to stay in the know of those different things that are just super new for our profession that's just trying to help pets. And I love it's helping pets and the veterinary community. And then it was a little after that I started helping Ken. But also in the pandemic, as you probably know, that all the challenges that were in vet med seemed to really spew to the surface, and things just got all the harder, and people were really interested in, okay, what else can I do, or how can I kind of come over this burnout and fatigue that I'm always feeling at work. And that's when I got to talk with lots of different veterinary professionals and really realized how little they understood that they could do with, being a veterinary professional, and really making sure that they weren't putting like their personal identity on, again, that job title versus, what are the values that I like. And so that was the birth of the podcast, Vet Life Reimagined, to help show just the diversity of this profession when it comes to, you can find a veterinarian or a veterinary technician in every corner of the world. I firmly believe that. And we're just really cool human beings. So it's been very rewarding for me because I love getting to meet all the cool people in this profession.
No, that's super exciting. So you clearly have no passion for veterinary medicine, no passion for building a better future. We're in an interesting time in veterinary medicine, right? It depends upon like who you talk to. The eternal optimists, see the veterinary profession and never having been better. The eternal pessimists, the veterinary profession is ending and veterinary medicine is never going to be around again. I mean, you seem like you're probably an optimist. How do you kind of envision building a sustainable, healthy veterinary community where pet owners can access care, where veterinarians can find success and joy in their career and not feel like it's a burden, but then, balancing all of that with like just the economics of this kind of changing dynamics, right? Where we're seeing veterinary salaries rise, but we're seeing cost of care rise. We're seeing new technologies come in, which are wonderful because they extend life. They allow for early diagnosis that was never present before, but then it creates a lot of like incremental burden, both on pet owners and then therefore indirectly or directly probably on like their care providers. So like, how do you see all of these pieces fitting together, Megan, and creating like a sustainable future that is wonderful for pet owners and veterinarians? And the support team that work in the profession as well. We don't want to leave them out.
It's the whole team. We cannot do it without everybody on the team. I do like to think I'm an optimist, but I think it's because I believe that we have to understand our part in it and understanding what we can control and what we cannot. and not being a victim, but really taking responsibility for what we can. And I think that's a huge part of not getting overwhelmed, breaking it down, and doing, again, our part to make this a wonderful profession for pets, for pet owners, as well as the veterinary team. And I think just from an individual level, if you're worried about how am I going to thrive in this crazy world and all these changes that are going on, just to start simply, have boundaries. Understand, again, what you can control and what you can't. Understand what is most important to you and learn how to set up those boundaries in any way you have to do. I constantly say, because I'm a person that also struggles with boundaries, I get it. It is finding individuals who can help you. Because I will say that if I know someone is mistreating someone else, like I will defend somebody, right? So sometimes it's helpful to find the team and we can help each other and make sure that we have those healthy boundaries up that can keep us going. Because if you don't, the whole put your own oxygen mask, I know is probably an overused example, but you have to find a way to sustain yourself. And I think boundaries is going to be a big part of that. And then the other big thing that I don't know is talked enough about is working on the culture. If we start internally with building good cultures, one, you make a place that people want to work. And that is actually the number one reason why people leave a workplace is because of the culture. And so if we can retain our people and make it a fun or a good place to work, by the way, your clients will know. They can tell when people are happy at work and they're doing well. And I think you just kind of set everything up for success when you start at the core and build a really good culture at work. And again, sometimes that starts as an individual and talking. And hey, if you want to start there, I said you could have an educational meeting at an open house. But hey, what about if you just want to be a big part of an internal initiative of trying to make a really good place to work? I think that's a great thing too. And again, having that mindset of curiosity and possibilities, I think is really helpful, because when you can be a curious person, I'm not saying that you just accept everything that comes your way. We definitely aren't like that in vet med, where we have a lot more skeptics, but that's why I'm encouraging the curiosity, because I know most of us are skeptics, but embrace that curiosity, listen, and just kind of hear things out. It's okay to look at it from the skeptic perspective as well, but definitely take the time to listen and see what are possibilities and do a what if. Like, what if this could work? What would that look like? And I think that's helpful. And then very lastly, I mentioned this a little bit with the boundaries, is really surround yourself with people that are also in that mindset, that also value building good cultures, that also value curiosity and the possibilities of our profession and what we can do all together.
I love that. That was awesome. A lot of good nuggets there. And you brought up curiosity. So I wanted to ask you, I mean, you have a great reputation as an outside the box thinker. So would love to know one or two, if anything jumps off the top of your head, what are some of the kind of further outside of the box ideas that you're thinking about right now for vet med?
I had to think of what would be super outside the box for people. It is probably my belief that it is great to bring in people with different backgrounds at the table to make discussions and talk about things, because I'm a huge believer in cross-functional work. So I've been very lucky that everywhere I've gone, I've had roles that were very cross-functional. I have learned so much. You get such a wonderful perspective when you can see people in all these different areas. And then when you can actually work together and talk together, hear those perspectives, you often come up with much better ideas. And so I'm such a big believer in that. So when we have, please don't crucify me, Chewy come into the veterinary space, or, entrepreneurs that are, oh my goodness, they come from all corners of the world. We've got tech entrepreneurs, we've got, AI, all sorts of things coming together. And it is so funny because they don't know how to talk to vets, and vets don't know how to talk to them. And I really think it's so important to listen to each other and, going back to that curiosity. But I think it's actually a good thing. It can be a really good thing, but it won't be if the veterinary team doesn't participate in that conversation, because change is happening. Change is going to continue to happen. If the veterinary voice is not contributing to that, that's not ideal. We know this profession. We don't necessarily know AI, but we can help and make it a better future. So I'm a huge advocate for that.
I love it. Again, as we kind of close it in and wrap up, Megan, I mean, there's just been so many great things and great little pieces of advice for people to hold on to. I always kind of think about it like this, though, right? Like, a lot of what you're talking about is change, growth, advancement, and it's tough. It's tough even if you're in that growth mindset. It's even more tough if you feel like you're stuck in the mud, right? And with all the change and everything that's going on in the profession right now, like, I do talk to friends who just kind of feel stuck in the mud, right? Like, it's just, we're stuck. So what would you say, as somebody who's full of incredible advice and guidance, what's like that first step to unstuck yourself so we can go take all the 35 other pieces of advice that you shared and put them into action?
Going back to that mindset of deciding to be curious is huge. Understanding your personal values, I think that's just going to help in general. But when it comes to, if you feel like you're stuck because you don't have control, educate yourself. There is something about that knowledge is power. When you understand what's going on in veterinary medicine, I think it starts to open up that, oh, I get it. And so you'll start to find maybe where you can start having the influence so that you can have that impact that you're looking for on your personal career and the profession as a whole. So I hope that's at least somewhat tactical. There are plenty of great podcasts and newsletters to stay in the know. I'm happy to recommend some if you're looking for that. Of course, this one is a great one as well. But just stay informed, participate in conversations. And I think you'll start to feel like you'll have a little more power and you'll find those good people. Like, for me, I felt kind of stuck. I didn't really know where to go. I was feeling like that odd veterinarian and nobody quite understood me. And I went to the Veterinary Innovation Summit. And all of a sudden I was surrounded by hundreds of people who were like me, were curious and wanting to know more and were open-minded. And that, oh my goodness, that makes such a difference. I truly believe that too, is start learning, start being curious and find those other people. And when you know that you're not alone, that's a wonderful place to be.
No, I mean, like, I almost again, two things. I heard, take action and find your tribe. Like, if you do those two things, you can start to be able to move the ball forward and at least get unstuck because you have support and you set one action that you're going to take, which is awesome. Well, this is very different, I think, for us. Megan, you were kind of a first guest who we brought on that wasn't quite as business focused. So this was a lot of fun for me. Really appreciate you coming on and being a part of the show, sharing a little time with us. As we wrap up, we do have one final question that we always ask every guest. Probably it really, the first piece of the question is a little challenging. The second piece will be easy for you. So there's a little slogan that can hang over the toilet paper that says everybody wants to change the world, but no one wants to change the toilet paper. So all of our guests have to just answer honestly if they always change the toilet paper when it runs out, or if you kind of will walk away and hope maybe somebody else will grab it for you.
I do actually always change, and I'm very particular because I want it in a certain direction. So yes, I change the toilet paper.
That's become a little bit of a debate amongst some of our guests.
We actually maybe should just start a tracker on the page because there's very definitive opinions. I have no opinion on whether it's over or under, but I am starting to pay more attention because everybody that answers responds. Well, I change it because I want it over, or I change it because I want to pull it from under. And that seems like the motivating factor to change it.
Hey, I mean, it gets you to at least be nice enough to change it. So
the end result's what counts. Our last question is probably a lot easier. For those people who do want to change the world, very quickly, we've picked your brain for advice for the last 40 minutes. But what's your one single piece of advice? And it can be one word if you want.
Believe you can. I think that's a big place to start.
I think on that,
I love it.
the mic and walk away.
Yeah, that was That was fantastic. That was a little bit deeper sometimes. You never know what you're going to get with that one. I love it. Believe that you can. Dr. Sprinkle, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. Our guest again, Dr. Megan Sprinkle. Check her out on the Vet Life Reimagined podcast if you like what you heard. Thanks so much for your time. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks again for tuning in to the Vet Worthwhile podcast. You can find us online at signaturefd.com/signature-veterinary. And then our ask would be, if you found this episode valuable, just think of one friend or colleague that you think would enjoy the content and just please share. So thanks again. We'll see you next time.
Travis York is the owner of 3-in-1 Vet Advisors and a partner of Signature FD. 3-in-1 Vet Advisors is a veterinary consulting and strategic planning firm of which Signature FD has no involvement or ownership. James Yost is a partner and wealth advisor at Signature FD. Signature FD is an investment advisor registered with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. 3-in-1 Vet Advisors and Signature FD are not affiliated. Mr. York provides all non-investment advisory services through 3-in-1 Vet Advisors. The opinions of the guests and the contents of this podcast are intended to be educational only and should not be relied upon as investment, tax, business, or planning advice. You should consult with a professional advisor prior to taking any course of action that may impact you or your business.